everyone for joining us this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, for today's webinar. So this is actually a picture of me that you can see on your screen right now. Uh, and today's webinar is a little bit different from what we usually do in our series. Most often we talk very specifically about, for instance, different soft skills or hard skills. So today we thought we would shift a little bit and do some lessons and have the webinar be more on that focus. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with us, we are Easy Sigma Group. We've been around since 2000. We're very passionate about continuous improvement and soft skills and giving our knowledge to everyone out there. So we work with organizations in every industry. And we really love to stay connected with our clients and to hear how they've been able to use the tools and concepts they've learned with us and been able to apply it not only to their workplace, but in some cases to their lives. So we do offer many different services. We offer software. We try to offer our clients a full 360-degree solution. And we do have a partnership with Bay 3000, our sister company, for project management training as well. So I'll be delivering today's webinar. Just to give you a little bit of a background as to why I'm speaking on this topic. I actually went to university as a classical saxophone performance major. And so my focus was on solo concerts, but I also played with quite a few orchestras in Toronto, in the Tri-Cities area. I was a soloist, for instance, with the Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber Music Society. I played in several music festivals. In the summers while I was a student, I was privileged enough to be able to work with a lot of amazing saxophone players from Canada, the States, from Argentina, from France. And so I was very privileged to have been able to have such a wide range of instruction on the musical side. For reasons which would probably be another webinar or private conversation, I ended up moving away from music and got into more the business side of things. Early on in my early 20s, I moved to Kingston, opened a business there, worked with a lot of university students, trying to help them. My passion was to give them the tools so that they wouldn't have to be reliant on OSAP debt as I was. And then from there, I worked in gyms and eventually made my way to Easy Sigma, where I've been for the past 15 years. And so my role within Easy Sigma has got a wide range from admin, marketing, design, operations, strategic planning, all sorts of things. So that's a little bit of where I'll be coming from. And so the basis of this is a lot of the skills and things I learned as a musician, specifically within the context of playing within a group, an orchestra, or even a saxophone quartet, which I toured with, and how these lessons are completely applicable to what I've done for this second part of my life or career. So quite often I read articles or I see things talking about conductors and what leaders can learn from a conductor and from that perspective. But and same thing goes for books and all sorts of things. But there seems to be quite a bit of a gap when it comes to lessons for people that are I'll just say workers or team people that are just working in an organization. Because the fact is that the majority of people are never going to reach a senior leadership role or even any kind of a leadership role. They'll spend their career working, being a valuable contributor to whatever organization they're a part of, but they most likely will not reach that leadership position. And yet there doesn't seem to be very much focus on how this group of people can become really good at what they do and different lessons that they can learn and teach each other. So that's the perspective that I'm going to try and focus on throughout our time together today. and how the things I learned as a musician, as a player within a group of people has helped me contribute to organizations that I've worked with, not from a leadership perspective, but as a team player and as just a member of the organization. So the first thing that I really learned and I want to talk about is teamwork. Now, you can see on your screen a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. I think that's an adage that most of us have probably heard before. And I must say, it, especially within the context of playing within an orchestra, it can be very, very true. Because when you think about the way an orchestra is put together, you've got your instruments, which are in different sections, and within that section, you've got different parts and different roles, and every single piece or every single part contributes to the whole, contributes to that ultimate outcome, which is quite often the performance, the ultimate performance. And so it's very important to be able to work together and to learn how to connect with your teammates and to help each other out. Because if there is one person within your section that really is struggling, maybe with a technical aspect, or they might be playing a little bit too loud and overplaying other people, then it really does impact everybody. So being able to work together as a team, to be able to connect with each other and communicate with each other, really is a very important lesson that has certainly helped when I've worked, and especially within a sales team or a marketing team, being able to collaborate with other people and being able to listen and help each other out. Because again, we're all working towards the same ultimate goal. Communication is also very important, and quite often I'll read or hear about communication as it relates to the performer and the audience, and how music is the ultimate language that anybody in the world can understand. They can understand if it's a sad tune or if it's a happy one or whatever. However, when you step back from that and you think about the communication that happens just between the musicians, between the conductor and the orchestra, there's a lot going on. For instance, body language. This is something that I became very aware of, specifically when I was in a quartet, and understanding, being able to watch the other three people I was playing with to see when we would begin, when we would end, when we would slow down. A lot of that had to do with what was going on, what we were doing physically. Eye contact is a huge element of communication, because when you're in the middle of a performance, you can't just start talking or stand up. It's that eye contact that needs to happen quite often between the musicians and the conductor, or within other parts of the orchestra, and what's going on. For instance, waiting if there's a cue coming up, being able to look up and know that that's when I'm supposed to start. And even just breathing, learning how to breathe in tune with everybody else that I'm playing with. And so all of these elements and communication really taught me to be quite aware when I'm working with people, and these skills are very transferable. Sure, maybe I don't have to sync up my breathing with a colleague, but being aware when I'm speaking with them of what's going on with their body language, what's happening, and just making sure that I'm actually paying attention. Because that's something that we can become very easily distracted, especially these days. I found there seems to be an acceleration over the last 5 to 10 years of how much distraction comes into the workplace and just into our lives in general. So having that ability to step back and just to be a little bit still and listen is a great skill that playing in an orchestra has really helped and taught me. Strategic argumentation. This is something that I'm not sure if many people really consider, because there's a lot of strategic decisions that happen when you're performing with a group of people, starting even with just what the piece of music is and how that fits into the context of the entire concert. Is there a theme going on? Is there something happening that we want to tell the audience? Is there a specific story? And then how does each of those pieces fit into that narrative that's happening throughout the entire concert? And so because of that, there's a lot of decisions that need to happen. There's different interpretations, and sometimes that can cause some heated discussions and some passionate discussions. And so learning how to actually speak up, how to give an opinion, and how to be able to offer some real solid logic behind it is definitely a great skill that can be learned from playing within a group of people. Because again, understanding that all of you have the same end goal in mind, which is ultimately to give a great performance, to be able to have the audience come away feeling something or understanding something about themselves a little bit better because of what they heard, is what we want to accomplish. And so being able to understand how to actually argue in a strategic way is, again, a great skill, and something, especially as a woman over the last 20 years working with different organizations and understanding that sometimes it can be a little bit challenging for people to speak up as a woman, or even to be heard from my colleagues. So and this is definitely another great skill learned from being in an orchestra. Now, collaboration is probably one of those skills or one of those lessons that is like, yes, well, of course you have to collaborate because you're working with other people, but there really is an enormous amount that goes on. Because as I mentioned earlier, within the orchestra, within the sections, there's different parts and different things going on, and understanding how all of those parts come together is really important. And also being able to trust that these parts connect with someone on the other side of the stage that you may not necessarily be able to hear simply because of where you're sitting, but being able to trust that it's all working together, and it's all working together to produce something interesting or beautiful or emotional or whatever the case may be. And so because of that, there's just naturally occurring a lot of collaboration. And especially when there's some challenging parts or some little sections of music that sound completely foreign to everything else that's going on, being able to work with the people around you, the other sections, to see how they actually fit together to work as a whole, really is a great skill that I've been able to bring over into the business world, and really been able to understand that within the area that I'm working, again, whatever department it is, if it's IT or if it's operations or customer service or whatever, that my little piece of the pie, that maybe I don't actually see everything else that's going on, but I know that within my piece of the pie, I need to be able to work with the people, to collaborate with the people around me, to make sure our piece is working as effective and as well as we possibly can, so that when it fits into the rest of the pie, everything works together, and the ultimate result for whatever our client or customer or end user is a positive experience, and that we can continue to be serving them. Presentation. This is another one of those that may seem rather obvious, but when you perform, and especially as a soloist, it can be very nerve-wracking because you're completely exposed. physically, emotionally, everything, the way you perform, the way you present yourself, everything, there's an element of judgment going on. People unfortunately still make very quick assumptions as soon as they see a person, as soon as a few notes, and because everyone has their own interpretation of music, it can be very easy to become distracted with that. But understanding how to present myself on stage within a group of people, whether that's working within the context of a specific dress code for an orchestra, or whether that's performing on my own, or maybe just with a piano player. Again, knowing how I'm standing, knowing what my posture is and how that's going to impact my sound, my breathing, everything about it is a great skill that's helped even with things like today, this presentation that we're on right now. Knowing where my hands are as I'm speaking, knowing where to look into the camera. All of these things are definitely valuable skills, and I think it's something that a lot of athletes become aware of as well, simply because they need to know where their body is and what their body is doing. And so, again, there's so many great things that we can learn from the arts and that we can transfer back and forth regardless of where we're working. Criticism. This is another big point that I get the impression quite often that in general, people still really struggle with criticism, either because immediately they become defensive, or there's a concern that the person offering the criticism is not doing it in my best interest. And so it's quite often a very touchy area. So I recall when I was still a student, every week we would have what we called master classes, where all the saxophone students, regardless of whether we were performance or education or jazz or classical, whatever it was, we all came together, and a couple of us would perform every week for our peers, and then we would receive a peer review on the spot, face to face, and what they liked, what they didn't like. The first few times this happened, I can't deny it was quite horrible, and I did get quite defensive, because again, the thinking was, well, this is my expression, this is my interpretation. However, what I quickly learned is that even though what I'm trying to express might be coming from a really good place or a really passionate place, that doesn't necessarily mean that the person that's receiving the information or the person that's receiving the music or the interpretation is getting the same thing out of it, because they have all of their own experiences, all of their own things that have happened that frame and color how they receive information and how they receive music. And so getting to the point where I could start to say or think in my mind as I'm receiving the criticism is that, well, this is what my music is telling this person. This is what I'm saying is telling this person. So if that's not the message I'm trying to get across, how can I improve? Not that this person is trying to attack me. And so I think this is also a very important skill that we can learn. And because quite often there is a lot of criticism that happens in the arts, whether it's formal or informal, whether it's with music or with the visual arts or with drama or whatever the case may be. Being able to receive criticism in an open way, being able to take it without becoming immediately defensive, and to be able to step back and actually think, all right, well, how can I take this information and improve and move forward is a great skill. And you think about it in your work life, with performance reviews or whatever the case may be, or even just colleagues, or for instance, something marketing or graphic design or communications, writing can also be very easy because it can get personal. So it can be easy to become a little bit defensive, and understanding that to take yourself out of that equation and just think about, well, what are the receiving ears hearing or seeing or getting out of this, and how can I help with the message, can definitely be a great skill to put into your toolbox. And by the way, as we're going through this, I'm sure you've noticed I've included a lot of quotes, and that's just for your own reference. These are some quotes that I've come across over the years, which I thought really were quite poignant and really worked well with some of these points that I was making. So if you're interested in getting a copy of this deck afterwards for some of these quotes, definitely feel free to reach out. Perseverance. This is again a great skill, and something that a lot of athletes, I'm sure, can also really apply as well from what they've learned. Perseverance in the context of playing with an orchestra and being a musician is an absolute necessity, because there's hours and hours of practicing alone and then hours of practicing in a group before actually getting to the end performance. And being able, especially when there's a challenging section or a really technical section, really being able to go through and continue to rehearse and practice until it gets right is definitely a great skill. And same when it comes to failing, because we're all going to fail at something at some point in our lives, and most likely multiple times. And so being able to continue and get up, not only is that connects with perseverance, but also with resilience. And so what really comes to mind is I think about back when, for instance, I would be working on a piece that had like a 10-bar area that was really, really challenging. What I was taught and the process that I ended up taking would be to go back to that first bar and play that, which is maybe 2 seconds long, over and over and over until I could play it perfectly 3 times in a row. Then do the same thing with the second bar, just that individual 2 seconds. Once I could play it perfectly 3 times a row, then play bar 1 and 2 together perfectly 3 times a row, and then go to bar 4. So again, it really teaches how to continue and how to keep pushing through and how to keep going, knowing that ultimately there's going to be an end result and a positive end result down the road. And having, again, tying into some of these things we've already spoken about with teamwork, with collaboration, having that support system to be able to help get you through has been a great lesson, and it's been something that I've been able to learn and take on to help colleagues as well when they've been struggling, to say, hey, you know what, even though it's really tough now, this is still what we're ultimately looking for, and this is what we're working towards. So it really is going to be worth going through this bit of frustration and persevering until we get this right. Resilience, as I mentioned, again, there's going to be a lot of ups, a lot of downs, and working with a group of people, regardless of whether we were hung out outside of rehearsals or whatever, really understanding that we're all working in this together has been a great perspective, looking at some of the different organizations I've worked with, where again, there were ups and downs, and sometimes deals wouldn't go through or contracts wouldn't happen, or whatever the case may be. But being able to get up, learn from what happened, and continue to work forward and to continue to be proactive and encourage each other, again, regardless of whether there's someone that I would want to hang out with outside of work. It doesn't matter, because within the context of this organization, this is what we're all working towards together. And so being able to just keep up and keep going, again, is another great skill that learned from playing within an orchestra, and that the arts can really teach us and that we can apply over into business. Focus. This also, when you're in the middle of performing, it's so important to make sure that your head is in the game and that you're actually playing, because there's always something going on. If I've got a distraction, or if I'm thinking about what needs to happen, or laundry or work or whatever obligations that I have going on, it's going to be a distraction which will ultimately hurt not only my own performance potentially, but the performance of my section and of the orchestra as a whole. Because within a performance, there's going to be cues from a conductor. I need to be able to listen to the people immediately around me to make sure that my tuning is correct, to make sure that the balance is correct. I'm not playing too loud or too softly, to make sure that what's going on between me and, let's say, the other side of the orchestra is working together, and that we're all of our pieces are coming. And again, if I've got things going on in the back of my mind, it's going to end up hurting everybody, which is unfortunate. And so something else that really taught me how to focus, which I'm quite grateful to, again, is more on the athletic side. Before music, I did a lot of figure skating, and I remember before doing any jumping or doing any turns or spins or anything, we would spend an hour on the ice just doing a figure eight. And whether we went over that figure eight 50 times or 100 times, the goal was to make it look as though we only went over it once or twice. And so learning how to actually get that focus, and what that's been able to do is help me if I've had a deadline, or for instance, if I need to write a copy or a presentation, to be able to put away distractions and really focus for an hour, for half an hour, even just 10 minutes to get something done, and then relax, let my mind wander, be a little out there, whatever, and then come back again. And it's a really great skill. And I actually found this quote from Eminem recently, which I thought was quite applicable, again, to how it feels once and often people will refer to it as being in the zone, but just being able and learning to teach yourself to focus and to get rid of some distractions is a great skill. Inclusion. I wanted to make sure I spoke on this, because I think, especially in light of what's been going on over the last 18 months or so with COVID and things that have come to light, it's something that I've reflected on quite a bit, thinking about my time back when I was playing and being in a group setting, in an orchestra or a quartet, whatever it may be, or even just with some bands that I played with. And ultimately, the whole idea of inclusion was that it didn't matter what you looked like, or your background, or what you wore, or how you smelled, or whatever the case may be. The point was whether we were both willing to come together to work and to do what needed to be done so that we could perform something, so that the music, the end result, would work out. And I know there's been some debate recently about the value of meritocracy, and my experience is that it ended up being quite a benefit, because we knew back then that, if this person who came from a totally different background, totally different country from I did, and looked totally different than I did, regardless, if they could do their part, if they could perform, and if I could perform and do the technical and the artistic side, when we come together, we can make some pretty special music together. And so a big part of that was making sure and learning to be humble and to be open, because again, I might be the person that is seen as the outsider, is seen as the minority, or whatever the case may be, or the weakest link. So making sure that I come to the table and come open and humble and willing to work with whomever is there has been, again, a great lesson to learn. Because when I think about in the workplace, I don't get to choose who my colleagues are, just like I don't get to choose who my parents are. It's something, when I come to work, those are the people that I come with. And obviously they're there for a reason. They have a certain skill set and they're in a certain job because they can contribute to either the department or the organization, the team, whatever the case may be. And so making sure that I come to the table, I come to that meeting being open, being humble, and understanding that we all have something to contribute, regardless of our preconceptions before we come, again, has been a great skill and a great lesson to learn from my time being in an orchestra. Analytical thinking. This is something also that's been spoken of quite a bit, especially in the debate about STEM versus STEAM, and how being creative and learning how to think outside the box is a great skill to have when you take it, and the connection between mathematics and music and everything. So I don't want to kind of go over too much there, because I know there's a lot of conversations from a lot of people that are much smarter than I am on this topic. But it definitely, I just wanted to reiterate that it is something that really has helped, and most specifically, being able to think outside and being able to think three-dimensionally instead of two-dimensionally, or take a look at a situation from a different perspective that maybe someone that I'm working with, they haven't been able to because of the experience that they've come up, that their experience leads them to think in this direction, whereas my experience allows me to think in this direction, and together we can maybe come up with a brand new creative solution to move forward and improve the team. So it's definitely worth looking into. There's some great articles on the benefits of creative thinking and analytical thinking and how that all ties together. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look there. So I just wanted, today was a shorter webinar, and I thank you so much for taking the time to come out. I did see a question pop up in the chat box, so feel free to, if you have any questions, to unmute yourself or to pop one in here. But the question that came up was, how much competition did you find among peers when giving feedback on master classes and other situations? Quite a bit. Because, and especially if I think about my chosen path as a classical saxophonist, there really isn't very much opportunity out there for classical saxophone players to play with orchestras. So it is incredibly competitive, and in a way, you really needed to have a bit of that thick skin to be able to compete with people and to be able to take that criticism. But turning that and being able to then move that in a more positive direction is really what helped to excel and really helped me when I was trying out for other gigs or for other orchestras and auditioning. So, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of competition, and I have no doubt that I was a contributor to it, especially in my early days in university. I have no doubt much more arrogant than I really had any business to be, and so it was a high horse I had to come down off and learn the hard way. So thank you for that. So just in our last couple of minutes, again, just a reminder, Easy Sigma, I know what I spoke about today really may not have a direct connection, but again, it's just we wanted to try a different style of webinar and show you how all these different experiences we have, whether it's something similar to me within the arts or in some kind of athletics, all of it we can use. And I really hope that you're able to do the same thing, that you're able to think back and really use these lessons you've learned in maybe completely random or different contexts and apply it to what you do here. Just like, for instance, what we teach with Lean Six Sigma, I went through the Green Belt course myself before getting started with Easy Sigma, and taking some of the skills there to improve our tool selection in our basement and to organize everything. So you never know where some of these skills and tools may come up for you. So we have our webinar series. We've got some open enrollment programs, which are hybrid learning programs. We've got self-paced online learning, coaching, all sorts of things going on. So if any of these are of any interest to you or continuous improvement in general, please feel free to reach out anytime. And otherwise, I just want to thank you again for coming today. And if you do have any other questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat box or unmute. And otherwise, I hope we will see you again at a future webinar. So thank you very much, everyone.